happening? Welcome in the Matt Bernier Show on DRFTV, live.drf.com, livestream.com, the Daily Racing Forum's Twitter handle at DRF Inside Post, as well as the Daily Racing Forum's Facebook page. My name is Matt Bernier. You can follow me on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. If you are listening to this live, thank you for doing so. Most of you, though, take this thing in podcast form. YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, video.drf.com, as well as Spotify. If you're over on YouTube, click that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up. Make sure that bell icon is lit up. It doesn't have a line through it, so you can get everything that DRFTV has. If you're over on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, however you get your podcasts, write us a review, give us a positive rating, greatly appreciated. This week, we're going to get back into the previewing of some races using Formulator, using replays, giving you an idea of what I'm looking at, whether you agree or disagree. I do think it's a fun exercise, and people seem to enjoy it. We'll go over the Marshua's River, which is the co-headliner down at Gulfstream Park on Saturday afternoon. And then we will roll it into the NFL Divisional Round Superfecta. Rough start for me to the postseason. 1-3 for the wild card weekend. Hopefully get back on the beam and get things just a little bit tighter this time around. And the Patriots are playing, so I've got a little bit of a selfish interest going on there. So without further ado, we'll just get this thing rolling along. Let's throw it in to breaking down the Marshua's River with Formulator and some replays. All right, so the Grade 3 Marshua's River, that's the race I'll dive into here. This week's slate of stakes races, we've got a number of stakes previews. The problem is there's so many different X factors. The other race down at Gulfstream, the other stakes race, heart to heart, very likely if he gets to the front, he's going to win that race. Out in Southern California, the rains, they're making that race. La Cienega down the hill look like it could very easily come off. The La Cañada looks like a crapshoot to begin with. And then you factor in a wet racetrack. Who knows how that shakes down. This one, at least, it looks like the weather's supposed to be okay. I think it's a pretty fun race. The pace dynamic's going to be interesting to take a look at, too. So we'll go through. We'll take a look at some replays. I'll give you some ideas about a few of these horses. And we'll go right in post-position order. The inside runner is Bellavase. This one goes out for Pletcher. Javier's got the mount. Most recently in that My Charmer, you see this horse is bet down to odds of 5-2. She was well meant in there, and you can see these red fractions basically throughout the entirety of the run. She was in a little bit of an interesting position down on the inside. I thought she had a pretty comfortable trip for the most part. You can see I've got one path comfortably moving well. There was a moment, though, where it seemed like going into the far turn, Javier just needed to scrub on her a little bit to get her into it. But we're going to take a look at the first replay here. And you can see this is her right here, the number one. She's in those sort of yellow and blue silks. And you're going to see at a key moment, she's really starting to get the engine cooking. The problem now becomes there's nowhere for her to really go. She's stuck in there. She's hemmed in by this 6 horse, and she's going to try to shoot up through here on the inside. Right there, she kind of steadies and checks, loses a little bit of momentum. That, to me, is a key point because we talk about losing momentum and losing your run. That's about as key a point as you're going to have that happen to you. As you're getting ready to turn for home, Javier's trying to let her loose. It's a little bit tight. She steadies. She bumps into the rail briefly. She's lost her full head of steam. It's going to take her a couple minutes to really get that stride back. Meanwhile, you've got these two fillies who have already kicked clear, and they're well on their way. I kind of look at that and say that was a key point in that race. I'm not suggesting that Bellavase could have beaten either one of these horses. Capital Temptress is the one out here that ultimately gets the job done. But I do think she would have been closer than what that sort of, call it 4.5 margin difference was between her and the top. I think there's a real scenario there where a cleaner run, I think she's actually able to get there and be a little bit closer when it's all said and done. She has the highest last out buyer in the field, and she has a number of Timeform US ratings that are fast enough. I think Bellavase is very interesting in here. The other piece that you need to factor in with this race is the pace dynamic, because there's a number of horses in here that like to be forwardly placed. The number 2, Hogan's Holiday, no disrespect. I could certainly see Marcus Vitale moving this one forward second off the bench. She had a 2-race win streak snap most recently. Just the problem is on paper, she's a little bit on the slow side. And I think it's going to take a career effort for her to even sniff the board, let alone win this race. The 3 horse is Bombshell. Now, Bombshell is an interesting runner in here for Arnaud Delacour because this is not necessarily a positive place for Delacour over the past handful of years. He's had some struggles down at Gulfstream Park. They just really haven't necessarily run as well as they have at some of the other spots. Having said that, he's 1 for 2 thus far at this championship meeting. But you're going to note that this most recent run here, this Forever Together at Aqueduct, she went off and she was an impressive winner that day, but that was washed off the turf. Now we're going to get back to the grass. And the 3 prior races, they were all strong, but they didn't necessarily make her a standout or even a likely win contender in a race like this. I certainly think she can win this race, but she's another one that's probably going to need a career effort. For what it's worth, we will take a look at the race from Aqueduct. This is already her out on the front end. You can see she's got her ears up. She's loving life out there. Pretty confident ride, all things considered. But you always have to take these races kind of with a grain of salt because these horses were meant to be running on the grass. And you see right now she's set down, she kicks away. Take a look. This is one of those things. I occasionally will go through and make notes of it, and I'm going to go through here and try to really slow it down. Take a look at her leg action and how high her knees are as opposed to some of these other fillies. She really gets up and down over the ground, and that's usually the sign to me of a horse that was going to prefer a turf surface. Doesn't mean that she's incapable, but look and see how short and kind of choppy the one strides are, as opposed to this filly, where it almost feels like she's, I don't want to say climbing, but she's got that high leg action because she's a turf horse. She's not a dirt horse. Ultimately, she goes on. She wins this race quite comfortably. There is something else that I'll show you right as we get down toward the wire that I don't love to see. I don't mind. I like the fact that her ears are going to get pricked here. But I'm going to slow it down one more time. We'll go down to about 3/4 speed. Watch her at the wire. She's going to change right back to her left lead, right at the very end, right there. That's not usually something you like to see, but at that point, perhaps she thought the race was over. You saw her ears were pricked. We'll show it one more time for those of you that have issues with the lead change piece. She's good, she's good, she's good, she's good. Now, left lead right there. So those are just certain things that you may want to keep an eye on. Again, she's an interesting horse depending on what the price she offers in here. If she ends up going off in that 6, 7, 8 to 1 range, I do think she's a little bit intriguing. If she takes a little bit of wise guy money and she ends up being in that 7 to 2, 4 to 1 range, I don't think she's nearly as intriguing. The 4 horse in here is Valedictorian. Now, Valedictorian was a horse that I picked in the Claiming Crown Tiara in her most recent start, and I thought she ran a bang-up race. To be honest, I think she ran too well to lose, considering she was out there chasing a horse called Starship Jubilee. Starship Jubilee is a graded stakes winner, and she went out there, and I think it was a great ride on Starship Jubilee. There was really, she had a terrible outside post. She's shown some speed in the past, so they were intent on going. And really, Gaffalione on Valedictorian, I thought he gave her a fine ride. He went up there and made sure that that filly was not going to get away from him. And she actually overtakes that filly that day. And we're going to take a look at that right now. They're really starting to race right now. You've got Starship Jubilee inside. You've got Valedictorian on the outside. And you can see the fractions. They're not blistering these opening 2 quarters. But right now, they're really throwing it down. You can see they've basically put a good 6, 7 lengths between themselves and the body of the field. This 5 horse, she's going to try, but she's to no avail. Right now, Valedictorian is going to put Starship Jubilee away. And unfortunately, keep an eye on the Ramsey horse out here on the far outside. She's finally going to change leads and come with a big, big late kick. That was kind of the difficult piece for me. I looked at it and said, you put away the horse that was bet basically to odds on, 3 to 5. And unfortunately, you're just going to get run over by this horse who came with a big full head of steam at the end. I thought in this instance, Valedictorian did all the dirty work. She basically won the battle but lost the war. We talk about that sort of angle all the time. I like what she did here. I think she fits in here quite well. The question for me is, from a race shape standpoint, how is she going to be ridden in a race like this? Because there is so much other speed in this spot. It is also worth noting Peru, the filly that ran her over, came back and earned an 88 in her next start. The 6th place finisher came back and earned an 80. So you know the form of that Claiming Crown Tiara has actually come back quite good. The distance is not an issue for her. I'm going to be very curious to see how she's ridden, because with all the other speed in here, you see in this race here, 2 starts back, she was out there setting fast fractions on the lead. Here she was pressing fast fractions. You've got other speed in this race. Rose Tree, we'll talk about Rose Tree in a moment. But you have a horse like I'm Betty G. Before we do the deep dive in her, you know what her game is. She has got 5 victories to her life. This one, gate to wire fashion, gate to wire fashion, gate to wire fashion, gate to wire fashion, gate to wire fashion. If she doesn't make the front, she doesn't win the race. That's just been her MO through 18 lifetime starts. I have no reason to believe that Saturday will be any different. You have La Signari, speed. Now, she's at least shown a little bit of versatility, where here in the stateside debut, she came with a nice late rally. Here in her last start over in France, she came from off the pace. But her only win here in the United States, gate to wire and the Wonder again. She's another one we'll talk about momentarily. And Monte Cristo, although she has shown that she can sit and come from off of it, arguably her biggest race today up at Saratoga, she was basically up there pushing slow fractions. So you've got and then you've got Bellevay's down to the inside. So you've got a number of girls in here that really, they kind of want to be forward. I'm not saying they absolutely need to lead, with the exception of I'm Betty G, but they all kind of have a similar running style. So I'll be very interested to see how they choose to ride Valedictorian. Do they want to be part of that scrum up front, or are they going to be a little bit more content to sit off? I brought up the number 5 horse, Rose Tree. I don't love her chances in here, but if you're looking for just kind of an outside of the box kind of horse, this is a horse that has only run on turf 1 time. You see that right over here in the career box in the upper right corner. From a buyer standpoint, a little bit light, but the time form number came back quite strong. You'll note that that was at Gulfstream at 1.16 miles, and her last start is a 3-year-old. I don't know that she is a likely win contender, but again, if you're not sold on some of these other girls in here, I think at a big price, she's not totally without a chance in here for Jonathan Shepard. Number 6 is I'm Betty G. Now, again, really to me, this race boils down to if she doesn't make the front, she can't win. At the same time, if she makes the front, I think there is enough other speed up there to keep her company, and I'm also not loving the form that she is displaying at this point. You take a look and see this race here, the ladies' turf at Kentucky Downs. I get it. It's an odd configuration. Maybe she has the benefit of the doubt built in. But then she goes out to California, albeit against better horses, Vasilika, Fahan Mura, and she just really does no running whatsoever. And then in the race down at the fairgrounds most recently, sure, that inside fraction, or the early fraction rather, was fast, but she just completely dropped anchor. So what ultimately does this lead me to believe? From a buyer standpoint, she's the horse to beat. I don't think she is the horse to beat by any stretch of the imagination on Saturday because of her running style, because of the form that she brings into this race. I'm Betty G would be a horse that I'd be trying to beat very aggressively in a spot like this. The 7 is La Signari. Now, La Signari is a horse that in the most recent start, the Belmont Oaks, keep in mind, that was back in July. We haven't seen her in quite some time. She showed speed and faded. Mile and a quarter against pretty solid runners. I'm not going to hold it against her. The Wonder, again, 2 starts back. Although she won, I'm almost going to hold that race against her because right here, take a look at the half-mile split. You got 50-4 for a half, and she's what? Basically 2 lengths clear of her nearest competitor. Now we're going into the far turn. These other fillies are starting to pick it up, and there's good ones in there. Daddy is a legend. We already mentioned significant form, but with fractions like 14-2 for 3/4, this filly better have something left in the tank if she's any good, and indeed she does. She goes on and she kicks away, and she's able to hold sway. I thought this was a fine effort, don't get me wrong, but I'm giving more credit to the ride than necessarily the horse in a spot like this. Rosario went out there. Nobody went with her. He made sure that she had something left for that stretch run, and she's able to hold off all the other finishers coming from off of it. Thought it was a fine effort, but I don't think she gets that sort of situation in this race on Saturday. And then you have that built-in piece of we haven't seen her since July the 7th. I mean, she's been gone for what, 7 months? 6 months, 7 months? I mean, I don't know what you're going to get off of a long layoff. Having said that, she did run quite well in this race here, her stateside debut, which was in April at Keeneland, and we hadn't seen her since November. So she's shown that she can handle coming off of a little bit of a layoff. I don't know that I love her in a spot like this. She has the highest last out raw time form rating in that Belmont Oaks, and keep in mind, that was her finishing in 10th in there. I think that Belmont Oaks is a little bit overrated, to be honest with you, from both figure makers, but that's neither here nor there. La Signari, she's a nice filly. I want to see one before I really go and think too highly about betting her. And then Monte Cristo. Monte Cristo is an interesting runner in here because Illman, I believe, made her a horse watch back after this race right here. This race at Laurel Park on June the 23rd. She comes back in the Tawi at Indiana Grand. No real excuse. She can't quite get there, but she does come with a nice late rally. Then they go up to Saratoga and run her in the restricted race, the risk averse. And you'll note Timeform US has these blue fractions throughout, meaning the pace was very slow. And you take a look and see half mile and 50-2. I mean, we're talking about a race that's run at a flat mile at Saratoga. That 50-2 is crawling. Now she's on the outside here in the orange silks with the blue hat, and she's just cruising past a 72-1 shot. So keep in mind, she has had so many things go her way in this spot at this point. Her main competition is now just starting to get rolling from the back of the pack. Meanwhile, she's been able to cut out 3/4 and 14-4. Again, if she's a quality filly, she should have something left in the tank, and in fact, she does. She kicks away very impressively down the lane. Again, you got to factor in the difference in the likelihood of the race shape on Saturday as opposed to what you're seeing here in this race up at Saratoga, where she's not going to be able to walk the dog out there like that and press a 1,000,000-to-1 shot. It's just not going to happen. And even if she is sitting off of a relatively soft pace, it's going to be with some other quality up there. It's not going to be a 1,000,000-to-1 shot. So I don't know. I'm not going to hold this race, the pebbles, against her. You can see that she was eased. I do think the outside draw is interesting because she has at least shown in the past, albeit against weaker company, that she can come from 3 or 4 lengths off of it and make that nice run. I like the way that she finishes. I like her late turn of foot. To me, she is very interesting in here. In a race that, again, it's only 8 horses, but I think this is arguably the best race of the weekend. It's not the race of the day for Saturday. That's the La Cañada, but I think you can make the argument that this is the best race of the weekend as far as stakes are concerned. So ultimately, where did I go in here? From a pace dynamic, I'm not entirely sure how it's going to shake down. I would imagine I'm Betty G is going to be sent. I'd imagine Valedictorian is close. I think Bellavez sits the pocket, and I ultimately think you've got a horse like Monte Cristo on the far outside who comes up and sits just off. I'm going to go with Bellavez because I thought that little hint of trouble was enough for me to look at it and say, if she had clean run, I think she's closer than what this 3 and change margin is. And at the end of the day, second off the bench, she has the highest last out buyer. She's got Pletcher. She's got Javier. I think the trip is going to work out hopefully a little bit better for her this time around than it did in that My Charmer. I'm going to go 1, 8, 4, and 6. I do quite like Monte Cristo in here at a little bit of a price. 1, 8, 4, and 6 for me in the grade 3 Marshua's River. Hopefully Bellavez can get the job done. Let's take a look now. We'll transition over to the world of sports, and we'll take a look at the NFL Divisional Round, the Superfecta, for this upcoming weekend. NFL Divisional Round Superfecta, rough way for me to start off the postseason last week with a 1-3 beginning. Hopefully we can pick things up, get this engine cooking. We kick things off with the Colts and the Chiefs. Now, before we really dive into it again, head on over to sports.drf.com. That's the new sports betting site for the Daily Racing Form. You can find all sorts of numbers and statistics over there. I think some of the statistics and some of the trends are more valuable than other ones, but how different is that than with Formulator, where I think some Formulator facts have much more validity to them than other ones do. You as the handicapper, you're the one that gets to decide what's good and what's not good. There are lines over there. There's line movements. There's injury updates. There's trends. There's all sorts of good stuff. Sports.drf.com is where you want to go. I have the Colts plus 5.5 at the Chiefs. I think everyone is focused in on the idea that Andrew Luck can go out there and carve up the Chiefs. I don't disagree with that. But I'm more interested in the idea of Marlon Mack carving up the Chiefs, because the odd thing is, it seems like so many of these defenses, they have the particularly, and I can only speak mostly anyway here to my local team, the Patriots, from a secondary and a pass coverage sort of situation. I actually think they're quite good, but my God, they give up just giant chunks of yardage. It seems like every other run is 8-9 yards. I think the same thing could happen to the Chiefs. The dangerous thing there becomes, as much as you respect someone like Andrew Luck, who is clearly back at his best, with an offensive line like the Chiefs have put together, the Colts rather have put together, with a running back like Marlon Mack, and if you want the change up, sort of the change of pace back, Hines isn't bad either. He's not great. He's not nearly as good as Mack is. You could be very easily setting yourself up for a scenario where the Colts have the ball for 35 to 38 or 40 minutes. And if that's the case, you know that they can score on that Chiefs defense. And realistically, look, I probably downplayed the Colts defense a little bit last weekend. They pretty well shut down Houston. Now, Houston, maybe they're just not as good as I had hoped that they would, because I wanted them to come up here to New England this weekend. But I do think there's a scenario where the Colts can win this game. I'm not going to make a pick one way or the other about who actually wins outright, because I do think it'll be close. But I think the Colts are going to cover. Again, 5.5 over on sports.drf.com. They pull lines from all over the place. I've seen it as low as 5 in some spots. 5.5 is a little bit more interesting. Give me the Colts plus 5.5 on the road at the Chiefs. Cowboys at the Rams. This is a game that if you had asked me a month and a half ago, this would be a first or a divisional round matchup, I would have said Rams by a million. Well, the Rams are banged up. They kind of limped their way into the postseason. I know they won a couple of their last games, but it was against inferior company. It was against San Francisco and Arizona maybe. With the Cowboys, look, they beat Seattle fair and square last weekend. I didn't think it was a great game from Seattle, and I was totally wrong. I thought Seattle was head and shoulders better than the Cowboys. But there is a part of me that very similar to the way that I laid out the Colts game, and you're going to hear it again in another game that I'll talk about here in a second. I feel if the Cowboys can control the ball, control the clock 35, 40 minutes, and I know that's asking a lot, and sure, you kind of know what their game plan is. You're going to get a healthy heaping load of Ezekiel Elliott. I just still think there's a real scenario where if you keep the ball away from the Rams, Jared Goff has looked a little bit shaky over the final quarter of the season. Todd Gurley's not 100% healthy. That defense over there for L.A. is not nearly as good as it should be. I don't know. I mean, I don't know that Dallas is going to win this game, but 7 points is a lot in the postseason. I'm going to take the points. Give me the Cowboys on the road, which might as well be a home game. I think it's going to be a coin flip. We've talked about it with the Chargers more so than the Rams, but the LA teams just have no fan base, really, or no real diehard kind of home field advantage. I think there's going to be plenty of Cowboys fans there, and I just think 7 points on the road's a lot. Give me the Cowboys +7 at the Rams. I just think it's a situation where the Rams, I still think they probably win the game, but it wouldn't surprise me if the Cowboys somehow won this. I don't think they're very good, but it's all about potential and circumstances and matchups. And I just wonder if they can control the ball. If Dak doesn't blow the game for them, maybe they got a chance. Sunday, Chargers at Patriots. They're in Foxborough. The Pats are laying 4 points. There is nothing on paper that would suggest that the Patriots are better than the Chargers. There's nothing. For this year, anyway. And I guess the only thing that you could potentially lean on is that it's Belichick against Anthony Lynn. I look at it and say, every fiber of my being is saying that the Chargers are the better team, but I'm picking the Patriots. Sure, some of it probably is slightly biased, but at the same time, I just feel like the Patriots at home have been significantly better all year than they have been on the road. I think that has skewed some of the numbers where maybe they are that poor on the road. But the difference, I don't think, is just so monumental. I actually think they're closer to the home team than they are the road team. It's a major, probably a fatal flaw if they can't win on the road. But I think I still think they're pretty damn strong at home. 4 points, kind of in that weird area. I don't know why. Like I said, everything on paper says that the Chargers this year are a better team than the Patriots are. Give me the Patriots at home -4. In Belichick, I trust. You also have a little issue with the Chargers where potentially Melvin Gordon, he's a little bit banged up. He's always had a right knee, but then he hurt his left knee last week, and he's not 100%. So, at any rate, I'm going to go with the Pats. Give me the Pats at home -4. And the last game, the Eagles at the Saints. The Saints are laying 8 points at home. Again, 8 is... I said it with the Cowboys, and I was taking the points with the Cowboys on the road. 7's a lot in the postseason. 8 obviously is more. But I wonder if the Cinderella story, and when was the last time that a champion was the Cinderella? The Cinderella feel or story of the Eagles, and it has nothing to do with that game that they played a few months back where it was a complete bloodbath and the Saints won by like 40. But I just think the Saints, and I know they didn't play anyone in that last game of the year when they got their doors blown off by the Panthers. They kind of stumbled their way down the stretch. I just think the Saints are... I'm basically echoing everything you've heard from anybody else. I think the Saints are just the best team in the NFC, probably the best team in the NFL. They're at home. If you've never been to the Superdome for a home game, I've been lucky enough. I was down there a couple of years ago on vacation. We went down to the game where they played the Carolina Panthers. It was the year the Panthers went to the Super Bowl, and at the time they were undefeated. I think they were 11-0, something like that. That place is outrageous. I know you hear all the announcers talk about it and all this other stuff, and anybody that listens that's down from New Orleans or Louisiana and you go down there, you know what I'm talking about. It is absolutely mind-boggling how loud that place gets, to the point where you can't hear. And that's me sitting up in the first row of the second deck. I can't imagine what it must be like down in the field. I just think that home field is going to be too much for the Eagles to overcome. And the Saints, I think, are just loaded top to bottom on offense. And then their defense is actually pretty good. I think statistically I had heard something like, over the final 5 weeks of the season, they may actually have been, they were one of the top 3 or 4 defenses in the league. So I just think the Saints are the better team. I'm going to go with the home team there. Saints -8. So, recap. 1-3 last weekend and the wild card weekend. Hopefully we can pick things up here, get at least closer to 500 exiting this round. Colts at Chiefs, give me the Colts +5.5. Cowboys at Rams, give me the Cowboys +7. Chargers at Patriots, give me the Patriots -4. Eagles at Saints, give me the Saints -8. The NFL Divisional Round Superfecta. And again, you can get all those lines. You can get all sorts of great trends and details and matchups and X, Y, and Z over on sports.drf.com. If you've been listening live, thanks for doing so. Live.drf.com. Is that what it is? That's the address? Live.drf.com. Livestream.com. Daily Racing Forums Twitter handle @DRF Inside Post, as well as the Daily Racing Forums Facebook page. If you listen to this in podcasts like most of you do, YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, video.drf.com, as well as Spotify. If you're over on YouTube, click that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up. If you're over on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, however you get your podcast, write a review, give us a positive rating, greatly appreciated. Questions, comments, concerns beneath the video player on YouTube or on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. I'm usually pretty good at I definitely look at the Twitter. I'm usually pretty good at looking at the YouTube comments and things of that nature. So until I come back with the recap show on Tuesday, we're going to throw this into the latest edition of Out of the Gate. Best of luck this weekend, however you play, wherever you play, whatever you play. This has been the preview edition of the Matt Bernier Show.